If you're not properly taking care of your hot water tank, you could be wasting hundreds of dollars. So in this video, we're going to talk about the right way to clean out your hot water tank and what you can do, especially if you've neglected this over a long period of time. One of the reasons why it's important to do this regularly is because your water capacity will decrease as the amount of sediment increases inside of your tank. If you have a lot of sediment build up, you're not going to have as much water to go around when it comes time to use it. It's also going to cost you more money in the end because your hot water tank is going to run more frequently. And on top of all this, the excess sediment in your tank can actually eat through your tank. So you want to make sure to take care of this regularly and not let it set for an extended period of time. Now, if you do let it set for an extended period of time, one thing that I found is this tool called the Turbo Tank Cleaner, and this is supposed to go inside of the tank and help break up an additional amount of sediment that normal flushing can't get to. So in this video, after we go through the process of flushing out the hot water tank the normal way, I'm going to use this tool to see how much additional sediment we can get out of it and see if this is actually worth the extra money. The first thing we need to do is make sure the hot water tank is turned off. So if you have a gas hot water tank, then you just have to simply turn the knob in the front from its current position to pilot mode. If you have an electric water tank, you should be able to go back to the breaker panel and simply flip off the breaker to turn it off while we're doing this process. Next, we'll have to turn off the cold water supply to the tank. It's normally a quarter turn valve that should be in line in the cold water inlet to your water tank. You shouldn't have to turn off the whole house water to do this job, but if you can't shut off the water specifically to the hot water heater, then you're going to have to turn off all the water to the house. Unfortunately, if you don't shut off the cold water supply the first time, then it's not going to be able to completely drain the tank because it's going to be continuously filling the tank up as we're draining it. So it's important to turn this off at least for this first drain. The next thing you want to do is connect a garden hose to the bottom drain spigot of the hot water tank. You'll also want to make sure that the connection is tight, but you don't want to over tighten it either because you don't want to strip the threads accidentally. And then the other end of the hose, you want to make sure to run that outside far enough away from the house to where the water is not going to run back into the house. And also make sure you're not draining this to a location that's going to affect plants and flowers because this is going to be very hot water that's coming out of the end of the hose. You could also drain it to a floor drain if you need to, but if you have to do that, just be careful because you don't want that hot water going everywhere. Now we need to make sure air is going to come into the system so that way it drains properly. So you'll need to go to a sink, and most likely you'll want to go to the sink that's closest to the hot water tank. And then just simply turn on the hot water and make sure it stays on. Normally that process is going to allow enough air to come back into the system so it can drain properly, but you might have to do one more step, which we'll talk about here in a second. The next thing you'll want to do is open the drain valve where the garden hose is attached to that spigot. Now at this point, if you don't see any water coming out and if you don't hear anything happening inside of the tank, like water or air kind of moving around to where it's trying to drain, then you're going to want to do one more thing, which is you're going to want to open up the pressure release valve on the side of the hot water tank. And the pressure release valve is normally in place, so if you have an excess buildup of pressure inside the hot water tank for whatever reason, then that pressure release valve is going to discharge that buildup of pressure safely instead of the hot water tank quite literally exploding. The reason you might have to do this is because you might have a backflow valve installed somewhere, and that would prevent any air from coming and flowing back into the tank. So again, just open up that pressure relief valve and then all of the water should start flowing out normally. Now, honestly, I haven't drained my tank in a few years, and you can see here the amount of sediment that's coming out on just the initial drain. It doesn't look like a whole lot, which may or may not be a good sign, but we'll see as we keep going. Now that it's drained completely, we're going to come back into the house and turn on that cold water supply. It's going to force the cold water into the bottom of the hot water tank, and it's going to kind of break up the extra sediment that's in the bottom of it, and that should remove more sediment from the tank than we got from the initial drain. Just leave everything open for this process, and you'll want to run the water for a few minutes, probably say 5 minutes or so, to kind of start to break that up. And now you can see here, this is the additional amount of sediment we were able to get out of the tank from just doing that cold water flush. You can go through the process of filling up the tank a couple times with that cold water pressure if you want to try and see how much more sediment you can get out of the tank. Sometimes people recommend that you fill up the tank completely again and then drain it out completely. Although I don't really see that doing a lot of good because the extra sediment that might be still in the tank is probably going to be caked on to a point to where just filling it up with water again and draining it again isn't going to remove it. Now that we've gone through the normal flush process, I want to do one more thing and try this tool out that I found on Amazon. This is called the Turbo Tank Cleaner, and because I haven't cleaned this tank out for a long time, shame on me, I want to make sure all the sediment is out of the tank as best as I can. So the way this works is this spring that's on this device is going to spin inside of the hot water tank, and it's going to break up any extra calcium and sediment deposits that might be stuck inside of it. As this wire spins around from the drill, it also spins a metal grinding disc inside of this, so that way any large chunks of sediment that might come through and potentially clog up this device will actually get chewed up and then exit out of the drain hose. So it seems like a pretty cool device, and we're going to find out exactly how good it is. They say to make sure this nut doesn't get too tight as you're using the drill. They also say you should coat this rubber seal with waterproof grease before you use it, so we're going to go ahead and do that now. I think the grease is to help prevent this nut from over-tightening as you use the turbo tank cleaner. Just going to use a little bit of this waterproof grease. I'll probably put some on the outside here too, just in case. And we'll slip this nut back on and tighten it down. I'm just going to twist it on and back it off a couple times just to make sure that grease is everywhere it can be. Now we need to remove this spigot. Now we feed this into the tank. Put this up. All right, we'll turn the water back on. We'll fill up the tank. You should also put a nozzle at the end of the hose so you can fill up the tank completely. Otherwise, if you don't have that in place, the water is going to slowly drain out before you're ready to use the turbo tank cleaner. We want to make sure the tank is completely full before we use it. Otherwise, the auger that's going to be spinning inside of the tank might damage the tank. Okay, so the tank's filling up now. We still have our pressure relief valve open, and we're going to wait for the water to fill up into the tank to about this level again. We're going to shut off the pressure relief valve, and once we do that, we're going to go back outside to undo the nozzle so that way the water can start flowing freely through the hose again, and then we'll come back in here and we'll attach our drill to this turbo tank cleaner and get the rest of the sediment out of the tank. Oh, there we go. So the water's starting to come out. So we're going to shut this off. Hook up our drill here. And then just slowly spin this around. And you're going to be able to see the sediment flow out of this too. This is pretty much done. This has been about 10 minutes or so, and what I was doing was I was alternating between going forward and reverse with the drill, and that seemed like it was doing the best job. So now that I'm not really getting any more particles coming out of this, I'm going to shut off the water supply, the cold water supply to the tank. We're going to let this tank drain completely again, so that way I can remove this tank cleaner and put the drain spigot back in place. At this point, you should take the time to clean out the drain valve and also take the time to replace the Teflon tape on the outside of the threads so you have a nice tight seal that won't leak over time. All right, now we'll remove this. And we'll put the spigot back in. And this is how much additional sediment we could get out of the tank using the turbo tank cleaner. As you can tell, it's significantly more than just doing a standard cold flush of the tank. Now that our tank is flushed out as much as possible, we're going to go through the process in reverse and button everything back up. First, make sure the drain valve is closed, and if you have not used a turbo tank cleaner, make sure you detach the hose at this point. Then you'll come back to the hot water tank and turn the cold water supply back on. If you open up the pressure relief valve, make sure you wait until the tank is about half full before you close it again though, because once you start filling the tank back up with water, it's going to have a lot of air in the system. And a great way to purge that excess air is to leave that pressure relief valve open and have that extra air come out of the overflow. You'll want to be sure to monitor this though and close that pressure relief valve. If you don't monitor it and the water goes up to the pressure relief valve level, then it's simply going to drain onto the floor, which isn't good. Now you'll want to go back to the faucet that you had turned on and let all the remaining air purge out of the system. Should take about a minute to purge the air from the line. And you can see the noise has changed to where it sounds like it's normal water flowing through the pipes. We're going to go ahead and shut this off. Once the hot water tank is completely full, you'll want to turn the thermostat back on and set it back to the temperature you had it at previously. And again, if you have an electric water tank, then you'll want to go back to your breaker panel and turn the breakers back on. As far as whether or not you need the turbo tank cleaner, I think if you've been maintaining your hot water tank normally up to this point, say if you've been flushing it out once or twice a year, then it's probably fine not to have it. But if you've neglected the maintenance like I have, having that available to be able to knock out that additional sediment that's kind of been stuck for a while has been really helpful. So I think having it to clean out your tank initially, or maybe even the first couple of times to really knock out that sediment is a good idea. But after that, I don't think you need to continually use it every time you flush out your tank. If you're interested in picking up a turbo tank cleaner, I'll have a link in the video description below where you can go pick one up at its current best price. Otherwise, I want to say thanks for watching this video. Hopefully you found it helpful. If you did, be sure to check out this other video next. I'm sure you'll like it too. All right, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.